Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening from, and welcome to 1% Better, where we take a look at hidden stories in sport. I'm Xylon, and I'm joined by Dr. David Lipman. Now, we've concluded our Lactate bonus series with Aitor Verbier, so I thought I'd make the doctor's question lactate related to promote it for people to go and listen to those bonus episodes that just finished. Here's your question for you, David. At what blood lactate concentration does a doctor typically start worrying about a patient in a clinical setting? And how does that compare to like what an elite cyclist produces on a hard climb, for instance?
Yeah, I've actually said this on the podcast before that physiology of exercise looks a lot like disease. So like blood pressure will be up, heart rate will be high, you might have high lactate, your respiratory rate would be up. Like if you gave the same numbers at the top of a climb to a doctor, they'd freak out. So it's quite interesting to think about how like the concept of hormesis is something we talked about last week, which is like these stressors make us come back stronger. It's also probably why fit people tolerate being ill better, can clear it and can deal with it better. I think it'll depend, but anytime you're seeing a significant metabolic acidosis or a raise in lactate above baseline, so probably 1 millimolar is, I don't know what answer it's got there, but I would be using it always as a concerto of data. So always looking at all of the things. I wouldn't ever specifically look at it. I'm sure there is a value that it has, and I'm not sure what it is.
It says basically more than 2 millimole, higher than 2 millimole, doctors would be, like if you're sitting in a hospital and that's what you tested, doctors would be alarmed. Whereas like a pro cyclist on a hard climb, is way, way, way more higher than that.
Well, it depends. Depends on the cyclist. People like Jonas Vingegaard may not produce that much lactate, or rather, that is incorrect. He may not display much lactate in his blood because he uses so much of it, right? So we joked about Lionel Sanders a few weeks ago saying he doesn't produce lactate. If you become efficient enough and you don't do a lot of top end stuff, you can end up with this blood lactate profile that looks very flat and very like what we would call shifted to the right. So your first threshold may be quite quite low, and your second threshold might be quite low as well, because you just, as we said, I think it was last week, you produce lactate at all times. Once you overwhelm the local muscle, it then comes into the bloodstream, and that's generally when we talk about first thresholds. And then as that starts to accumulate above a certain amount, then we start to talk about second threshold. But if your mitochondria is very efficient, those thresholds can be quite a lot of actual lactate. So what we call it's not a concentration. It is the word is eluding me. Volumetric. So the actual amount of lactate might be more, but the concentration will not be high because you are using so much of it.
I find that very interesting. Thank you very much. If you find that interesting and you're listening to this podcast for the first time, please consider subscribing or following the podcast. We are growing very, very nicely, and it's thanks to every single one of you who has done that so far. We are supported by Precision Fuel and Hydration. We'll mention the Comrades Ultra Marathon that took place last week a few times on this podcast today, but I was watching it over the weekend, and I saw the first international male finishing, and he was a British guy finishing fourth. I thought I'd Google him, Alex Milner, because I thought, he's like the commentator said, he actually doesn't do this full time. Apparently, he's a school teacher. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that he's supported by Precision Fuel and Hydration, one of our partners on this podcast.
He can't be the first international because Piet Wiersma came second. He's Dutch.
Piet Wiersma is South African, man. He's our adopted son. He is as South African as they come, if you ask us now. He trains here, trains with the Nedbank Club. We've adopted him, and we do not see him as an international anymore.
What about the winner? George Cush,
He's South African.
Is he?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
You're not
so Alex Milne is he got sixth last year, so this is an upgrade. Obviously, he's obviously learned quite a bit. Although last year was obviously a down year, but he's the European record holder for the 50k in 2 hours 46. He won the World Champs 50k. He ran 2:13 in London this year, but he's got a 2:11 PB. So this guy is obviously marathon and beyond very impressive, very, very impressive. So I was surprised to see how low profile this guy was, given his achievements and those achievements. That was really impressive.
We do have a discount code if you want to be like Alex and use Precision Fuel and Hydration. That discount code is better 2026. That's 15% off your first purchase. We also have a link in the show notes down below that will apply the discount code directly. They also have a very cool free service for you. If you're unsure of how to fuel for your next event, you can book an absolutely free, no strings attached call with one of their experts and they will help you out. We do have a link to their calendar where you can do that in the show notes down below as well. David, how are you doing? Training going well? Racing is on the horizon for you?
Yeah, going pretty well. I did a nice couple of little primers in the gym on Monday, like a little bit of a primer session, a little bit priming this morning on the treadmill / rower. So that's nice. Well, racing this weekend, if we want to call it that. I don't know. I'm interested is probably the right word for this. To see what happens. Like, I'm obviously going to an event, and like we can call it a race if we want. The question is like, how do I enjoy that? Like, do I enjoy it is the first thing. The second thing is, will I be going hard, easy? How does that go? How will the Achilles hold up? If I go easy or hard, how does that make me feel the next day in terms of both physically and like mentally about the event? So, a lot of unknown. And, I'm historically an over preparer for these sort of events. Like, I would have done a ton of prep for this stuff. I would have been doing hills and all sorts, and I haven't done any of that. Or much less of it than I would have. I wouldn't say none, but much less than I would normally have done. So let's see how it goes. I'm interested just to see what comes of it all and how I pull up. And
so when do you make a decision? When do you decide? If you say you don't know if you're going to go hard, easy, slow, when do you make those decisions?
I don't know. That's it. Like,
that's the end of that. Like, right, let's move on.
Well, I really don't know. Like, part of me says, well, just go for it, and then you're going to have a sore Achilles the next day, and who cares? Part of me says that's stupid because, you risk it. Part of me says, well, why don't you start easy and then go harder? But part of me is like, well, I've been on these before, and if you get stuck behind slow people, it can be unpleasant and annoying, particularly uphill. So I'll probably spend a little bit of time. I barely looked at the course beyond like a cursory look. So I'll probably look at that, decide if there's a reason that I want to go a little bit harder earlier because of like tactically getting in front of some people who would otherwise be a bit slow. And I don't really love passing people like that. So let's see how that goes. And then, I'll probably try and take it pretty easy unless I'm feeling unbelievable late, and then just see how we go. There's a good amount of climbing. There is a descent to finish, so I can always speed up on the descent and really do some damage to the quads, which I'd be happy about, as opposed to hurting the Achilles or something like that. And I just don't know, like, part of me, I once went to a park run. That's why I don't go to park runs anymore. I went to a park run. I was like, oh, this is just going to be easy. And, I raced it because it's a park run. And I always like go back to that as like, how much discipline do you have, or how much can you actually take it easy once the gun goes off? Right. And so part of that's a discipline discussion. Part of it's also like, don't put yourself in that. If you're not sure you have the discipline, don't put yourself in the situation, right? So I don't really have the answer to that story or the answer to that question. So let's see, mate. Like,
what's the event again?
It's called Ultrax Villars. So Villars is the town in Switzerland. It's not too far from Lake Geneva, and Ultrax is the organization. So I've run one of their races before in Montreux. Not Montreux. Around the Matterhorn in Zermatt.
And what's the distance?
21-ish, 22, somewhere in there, like 20 to 22 kilometers with like 1,200 meters from memory. I'd need to look it up.
When was the last time your Achilles hurt?
This morning. Like every day.
Okay.
So like I've got some level of pain every day. And I'll limp at some point most days. So it's feeling a lot better.
Why don't you stop running? Why don't you stop running for 2 weeks completely?
Because that won't solve it. So because the burst is so grumpy, and because of compression is such a big role in it, it's not that I'm doing too much running. And to be honest, tendons generally don't respond to complete rest; they respond to loading. So my capacity of the tendon is improving both in the gym and on runs. And again, I wrote a little bit about this with respect to Stride last week and how you can see that. So you go check my newsletter, and I wrote about how I'm using Stride and some of the metrics that came with it. So that's the capacity of it, both acutely within a run and then chronically week to week, within a week and then building week on week. And those following me on Strava will see like there's a small little increase week on week. So there's that component. And there's also the pain component, which is going down. So it's definitely improving. And then I'm also increasing the gym capacity, both what I'm doing and then how much I can tolerate. So it's all going in the right direction. But it'll probably never be pain-free again whilst I'm running at all. So the question is, like, can I do something else other than running? And it's like, well, I don't really want to do that, right? So can I get to a stage where it's good enough, right? And I think I'm close to that. But yeah, there's a little bit of pain. It's not a lot of pain, but it's like half out of 10, 1 out of 10. And there's certainly probably a chronic pain component of this at this stage now. And so part of the way of dealing with chronic pain is about your relationship to the pain.
Okay, well, let's see it go. Let's see how it goes. Come back next week, give a report. My prediction is that you will get through relatively unscathed, and you will end up racing it at like a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10. That's my prediction. Let's see how it goes. I actually shouldn't have told you. I should have written it down here and then revealed it next week. But
or you should have said it off air, like added it in at the end of the episode for listeners.
Yeah,
put an Easter egg here, added in at the end of the episode so that it was on record. But I think that's probably a good bet. It's probably a fair bet for it. But what about you, mate? What have you been doing?
I've been a little annoyed the last few days because I haven't had any nerve sensation or anything for maybe over a month now, and been feeling really good, and the back hasn't been sensitive. But that has returned the last few days. I am exactly 5 months post L5S1 spinal fusion surgery now, and I've been trying to figure out why. And I think it's just because I've been seeing the bio more, so we've been doing more the harder sessions, and that's probably just a combination of the body responding to that, and also probably just the growth still happening, and I don't know, new growth spurt in the bone or something. But yeah, I've been doing some hard sessions. The bio is taking liberties because she sees how strong I am. She said basically, like, her patients usually, I'm 5 months post-surgery now, and her patients 7, 8, 9 months out still aren't this strong yet. So I think she's enjoying the challenge. But when I say nerve sensation, again, similar to you, like 2 out of 10 pain, 1 out of 10 pain, just feeling the nerve in the upper glute from time to time, not consistently, but if I'm lying down watching TV, getting off the couch, etc. And again, like you would advocate for, I find that movement helps. So if I get up, I go do a 3K walk, or I go to the gym to do stretches or something like that, that helps a lot. Just get some blood. Even if I get on the treadmill in the gym, walk for 10 minutes and then do some stretches, that helps a lot.
Yeah, generally motion is lotion, as they say.
Yeah. True. Okay, let's move on. We got a lot to get through today. Really exciting episode. First, we got to say a big thank you to Stride Running Power Meters, who supports this podcast. They, like Precision Fuel and Hydration, also had an athlete in Comrades Marathon this week, and you called it. Charlie Lawrence. He's an expert 100K runner. This was his debut in the Comrades Marathon, and he finished 6th. You called it. You said he'd get top 10 or top 5.
Yeah, I think I said that. I don't remember what I said, but I thought Charlie would go well. I didn't think he'd win. I just think there's probably a level of experience you need for the Comrades.
Definitely.
Just of course and that sort of stuff. Speaking of that, have you ever done the Comrades?
I have done Comrades Marathon. Got bragging rights because I had a friend who targeted my time this year and was very confident, because it was the exact same distance, upright, and was very confident that he was going to beat it. We signed a piece of paper. We took a bet. Needless to say, he finished an hour after my time. So I'm collecting on that bet later today, hopefully.
What's the bet? What was it for?
He's going to take us out for lunch. He's going to take us out for like a $100 lunch or whatever. I can't remember I don't know what the conversion is exactly.
Nice. Very good. Well, you're welcome, mate. I earned you a lunch. But no, Charlie did really well. As I said, there's experience component here. If he comes back, I think he'll do even better. We talked about Alex Milne previously. He ran 6th last year. He got 4th this year. So I think there's a big component of that. So there was some good content for those interested on Charlie's YouTube page that Stride shared as well around his build-up for this. And I think there'll be probably some in the aftermath as well. So I'm also pretty interested in what Charlie does next. He's an interesting runner. So he did Boston Marathon this year. He's done Comrades. He's done 100K, sort of time trials with Adidas, his sponsor. So, I wonder if trails are on the cards, or if he's going to stay exclusively on roads. Does he keep dabbling in the marathon, or does he stay at ultra distance? How does that all look? Like, there's a few of these runners where it's, Alex Milne's another one where it's kind of, you can kind of succeed at all these things, but it's a little bit hard, right? It's really hard to be, and I don't want to speak badly about Alex or Charlie's marathons. They're very impressive, but they're very much like, sub-elite times or back end of the elite pack times, which makes, listen, for them as an American and as a Brit, like you can actually, it's very easy for them to get entries into their local marathons, right, as part of that field because they want big fields. But whether they get significant financial reward for that is an interesting question, and I'm sure about that, right? I'm sure Charlie, being an Adidas athlete, did there was an incentive for him to go into someone like Boston because it's an Adidas race, but it's hard to know outside of that whether there's real appeal for them there or whether they're better off just doing ultras, and maybe the marathons are part of that build, right, as a bit of a training aspect to it.
As we mentioned, he's sponsored by Stride. If you'd like to check them out, we do have a link in the show notes down below. That link is directly related to us, so it helps us out if you do click on that. So do check them out. Some community shout outs. Let's have a look at what you've been up to in the last few days. The first one being Kai Bauer, who ran 15K in 1 hour 16 in a Tausteiner Waldorf. Also, shout out to longtime listeners, Abelang in Comrades Marathon, who went 10:45, and Luster, who went 10:18. They didn't run together, interestingly. Usually they do, but I need to find out from them why they didn't. There are different plans there, obviously.
Trouble in paradise.
Yeah, they must be fighting. The bromance must be in a rough patch. Matthew Marquardt, professional triathlete and longtime friend and listener to the podcast, went fourth at Ironman 70.3 Happy Valley. I was watching that. He was leading the bike for the longest time.
I saw on Instagram, he took a tumble going through an aid station. There was a speed bump just after it. He was drinking some water and then went down.
On the run?
I saw poor dude. Yeah, poor dude. It's on Instagram. You can check out his Instagram. He accepts the collab from Ironman. So it's one of those things where I'm like, do we need a speed bump there? Do we it's maybe you don't even notice it when you're setting it up, but it's like, oh, we're better off the other way around, right?
That course was very weird. It was like it had grass, it had walkways, it had road, and you had these funny like golf course like pathways and turns. It was very just, we run where we can. Also, shout out to Clemens Suligosh, who competed in the Kesteli Triathlon in Hungary, which was also the Hungarian and Slovenian middle distance national championships. So shout out to him. He went 14th overall and second in the Slovenian championships, 4:06. That is quick. He was not happy with his swim, but otherwise fairly happy. He went 75 minutes on the run. Absolutely flying. So shout out to you, Clement.
Also, shout out to Emily Donker. She got 7th in the pro field at Ironman Cairns. So I'm not sure how she feels about that. I haven't spoken to Emily about it, but it's anytime you place top 10 in a professional field is a good day. So congratulations, Emily. Also, our Australian French correspondent who stitched us up around around
April Fools.
April Fools, that's the word I was looking for. Shane Evans, he got second in Trail de Caudery, 18 kilometers in 1 hour 32. Also, Alistair Courtney, he does this every year. He does a South Downs Way 100 mile. I remember talking about it previously. And this year he did 15:17. So he just missed his sub 15 goal, but that's great work from Alistair. He got 8th there. And then Edward Tong, he got a new 5K PB. He ran 20:50. And then Tobias Schmidt did the Trail Run Sure UFA or UFFA. I don't know too much about this. It's an uphill race, 12 Ks with 1,260 meters, which is brutal. So he did 121 there, which is really good going uphill. That is really good going. That is a steep course. That is about 10% grade average, which is crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Do you have results of our latest Spotify poll? I think you put it up. This one is related to the Emily Dow episode, where we asked, what was the question? It was about whose time was...
No, I made a mistake here. I haven't changed the documents. This wasn't there. This was about, this is the week after the Emily Dow episode, where we talked about who had a better day in Sydney Marathon, Kipchoge or his wife.
Cape Town Marathon.
Cape Town Marathon, sorry, not Sydney Marathon, Cape Town, my bad. Anyway, and it was a 50-50 split, so people were unsure between him and his wife, so it's a very diplomatic set of answers and listeners we have there, but I did enjoy that some people thought that she had a better day than him.
And then I think it was her first marathon for people who might have missed that. So. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we've been putting out bonus episodes with Aitor Verbia, so go and check that out. It's been creating a lot of engagement. One question we did get on Spotify was from PT1980, which said, great episode, very interesting. As mentioned, that lactate is not just a fuel, but also has hormone signaling properties. How could exogenous lactate supplementation be allowed? Is it not just the same as taking exogenous testosterone, for example? It's a good question.
Yeah, it is a really good question. So yeah, there's certainly some signaling properties of it. I think so there's a couple of challenges here, and there's different ways of thinking about it. One corollary could be to say, listen, it has hormone-like properties, therefore it's like a hormone, and we ban that. That's certainly, and again, if we look at the criteria, there's 3 criteria to make it to the banned list. Does it improve performance or have the potential to improve performance? So the answer is probably yes. Could it be harmful or has the potential to do harm? It's probably a no. And then the third question, the third criteria, and again, you only have to meet 2 of these, is it against the spirit of the sport? And you could, again, these are suitably grey for a reason. They can argue them both ways based on whether they want to basically allow something or not. What I would say here is you could say, listen, it's similar to testosterone in that way. I would argue it's more similar to carbohydrates and ketones. And this is the same argument with ketones when, they were talking about should they be banned. It's more similar, and they have signaling properties as well, ketones. And you'll see that this is a comment on the lactate episode. The following episode that was released last week is on ketones, and we talk a bit about this. So there's certainly signaling properties to them, and again, they have the potential to bump up EPO production a little bit. So then you could argue, hey, this is there is reasons here that we should be banning them, right? I don't necessarily agree with that, and I think they're a food supplement. More commonly, it is basically these are foods, athletic foods. So it's similar to protein, carbohydrates, etc. So I don't think you need to ban them, nor should you ban them. And the magnitude of effect is not the same as exogenous testosterone, which is certainly one thing. The other thing I would say is it's really hard to test for these things because you produce it endogenously and it looks the same. And the half-life of these is very short, right? If you take lactate, it gets used pretty much straight away, similar with ketones. You'll have elevated levels for a period of time that's probably measured in minutes, maybe an hour.
Wow.
So it's really hard to then actually test for them functionally because, people will be using this in the race and the half-life of both of them, both ketones and lactate, will be reduced by the fact that you're using them because they're consumed, they're used. So because they get used up, it's not going to be the same in this context. So I strongly doubt they'll be banned, either of them, and certainly not lactate. And I wouldn't see it the same as testosterone, although it's a really good question. And it's a question we should be asking about anything, right, including carbohydrates, etc.
Very good question. Thanks so much for sending that in PT 1980. We got another comment in from Adam Schmidt who says, love this series and particularly this chat. The more nerdy, the better for me. Ato said that while lactate delivers less kilocalories per gram, it is much more efficient as it bypasses many of the earlier stages in the body carbohydrates has to go through before glycolysis. I'm assuming he means uptake, GLUT4 translocation, etc., all of which take energy. Am I reading this right that due to a passive uptake, lactate is more efficient? What would the same occur out of the GI tract to get it to the blood? Could you please expand? And then he mentioned later on again, apologies, he just answered that a bit later on in the episode, but would still love to hear more.
Yeah, so I think he's talking more about the chemical process here and breakdown of carbohydrate source, whatever the complexity of it. So that could be like a complex carbohydrate or it could be a more simple sugar. Going basically from that through glycolysis and then resulting in lactate, whereas you're giving the end product already. So it's more the chemical steps in between. And I think, we don't really quantify absorption costs. Like the energy taken to absorb it, we don't really quantify it, though the GLUT4 comment is an interesting one. I mean, it's obviously the MCT transporter that we talked about. But I wouldn't be able to tell you what the difference in energy expenditure to go through either of those is. So I don't know about that part of it, but it's more about skipping the steps of breakdown, both from a time and energy perspective, I think.
Thanks for sending in that question, Adam. You can get your questions into us on Instagram, DM us 1% Better Pod. Or if you're listening to this episode on Spotify, just comment over there. We also, for the old school folk, have an email address down below in the show notes. We are supported by Nomeo on this podcast. Shout out to one of our loyal listeners, Gabriel Bono Ayoki. He sent us a message saying, hello, mates, I forgot to mention, I need a shout out, please. I went 509 on my first 70.3. It was the Czechman last weekend in Czech Republic. The pro winner finished in 340. It was super flat and a fast course, and I was fueled by Nomeo. Very cool message there from Gabriel.
Yeah, so it's cool that he's using Nomeo. I mean, I'm hoping he didn't use it to fuel his whole thing. I hope he used it properly, as they suggest, so 3 hours before, and then use that to help him in that. I think it'd be particularly helpful with respect to the swim, because you don't really get a lot of warm up if you're not a pro for the swim. So I think it would really help there. Also, interestingly, when we swim, like our upper body is generally a lot more fast twitch than our lower body is, because it doesn't have a postural role to play, whereas our lower body muscles have a postural role to play. So there's a lot more slow twitch muscle there. So you have the propensity to produce a lot more lactate there. So it's interesting to think about, can we reduce that a little bit in the upper body, and does that help us either globally in the triathlon or for the swim leg particularly?
Naomi is a new partner to this podcast, so please show them some love. We do have a link in the show notes down below.
Yeah, please do go check them out. That helps them know that you've come from us. And of course, always checking out partners, rating the podcast, all that stuff helps us grow as well.
Okay, let's have a look at what's come across my desk. Some quick bits for you in the sporting world. Man, I wish when we previewed this that I called this in the podcast, because I was thinking it. The Knicks winning in 5. I remember you saying the Spurs are the favorites. Now, I don't follow NBA, but I was just like, these legacy teams, man, if they did something to make it to the finals, they're not losing in the finals, man. I was watching videos of the whole of New York going absolutely bonkers in the last few hours.
Well, you could argue that the Spurs are a legacy team as well in some respects. They've certainly got a long history as well. Maybe not as long as the Knicks, and they've certainly been winning more recently. But I think, when I talked about it to you recently, we talked about the fatigue factor as being part of it, and I think that played a huge role in it. I took some interesting things from it, given I want to touch on some similar stuff we talked about recently and some trends that we're seeing that I think apply to other sports. So the first was the salary cap thing. We've been talking a lot about salary cap. So Jalen Brunson, he took $165 million extension recently, which is a massive pay cut that he left.
America's a movie. Is it a real place? How is that someone's salary?
Well, there's only about 12 guys on the roster. So they don't have to pay many, and they're making a lot of money. They play 70 something games. So lots of money there. But anyway, he left $113 million on the negotiating table, basically, they estimate. So that then allows him to have a better team around him. And he said he needed that, right? So, and then as a result, people are calling him the king of New York. They're calling him the best Nick ever. What does that do for you off the court? So there's certainly some of this. Tom Brady did a little bit of this. Patrick Mahomes has done a little bit of this, where you intentionally take a little bit less. Particularly, I mean, that's a lot of money. It's that's 40% less, let's call it, which is significant, and it's hundreds of millions of dollars. But also, you're getting $150 million. So the question is what's the extra bit worth, and then can you recoup that in career earnings or earnings later, or those sort of things. So I think it's certainly that. There's also an aspect of pressure as well when you're paid on a supermax deal. You have to be a supermax player, right? And so I'd be interested to see, again, back to the cycling conversation we had last week. Would cyclists do this or not? Would Tadej take less, do all the commercial stuff off the bike to keep winning, to keep his team around him?
I mean, there'd be a lot more upside to have a stronger team in cycling, I'd say, than the NBA. If we talk about endorsements, there aren't that many personal endorsements in cycling versus a profile like someone in the NBA.
Got it. See what you mean there. Yeah, I was going to say it's both team sports, but yeah, no, that makes sense. Also, this was a historically good run statistically, and I don't think many people in the basketball world are talking about how Brunson's historically good in this respect, both from a clutch performance, so in the fourth quarter, total scoring, he had an average 30 something points, which is wild. And, just how good it's been in general, which is interesting. But I also think we see some trends in sport. Some of them are enduring, some of them ebb and flow a little bit. So the team versus the superstars, and we're seeing this a bit in the World Cup that we'll get to in a little while, right? Around are we looking at a team of superstars or a superstar team? Momentum, and as the way momentum plays it, and you're sort of talking about this with the Knicks, right, when they started winning. And then also generally people don't focus on defense enough, period, full stop, no questions asked, in my opinion. Generally, the best defensive team is usually top 4 in the league when it comes all said and done most years. And that's often something we don't. So there is that fact that exists. There's also the fact that most people would agree defense is mostly attitude and effort, not talent, whereas attack is talent or offense is talent. And that in that context, it always surprises me that more teams don't focus more on defense, particularly if you're underpowered, undermanned, or outgunned in some way. It's certainly, when I took over a rugby team, it's exactly what I did. It was just all right, let's get the defense up to scratch. Let's lose less games, and then we can focus on the attack and then win more games from there. And so did it that way. And we often have people say to us, you were really hard to play against. and you sort of outperformed what we thought you'd do. So
I've seen that. I've seen that in recent Man United managers and the board, and how they make decisions in rebuilding a team. They've often started with the defense, and you see them leaking less goals, and then making strategic signings off the back of that on attack to score more goals. Then,
yeah, and I think that makes sense, particularly in football where goals are very valuable.
mm.
Like we'll talk about this a little bit later, but like I almost think there's an argument that it's the good bit, it's a feature, not a bug, and I think it's maybe a bit of a bug for me in football, which is goals are so valuable that they often the score doesn't reflect the game, and the people who are very starry-eyed about football will say that's the magic of it. No matter how underpowered you are, you can still win. And we can talk about that with the Socceroos and Turkey, but I tend to think it's a bit of a bug because I love, I'm a coach, so I want to see process and the best team win in that respect. So, and the last thing on the Knicks, there's been calls for Spike Lee to get a ring, which I think is funny and kind of cool.
Why?
So he's paid because he pays for his own tickets, right? So a lot of those guys who are in the front row get given tickets. Spike Lee has paid for his own tickets his whole time. He's been a season ticket holder since 1985.
What?
Yes, that's roughly $300,000 per year since 1985. It's over $10 million.
That is cool. Shout out to him because I think this was the first time they won the championship in something like 53 years. So he hasn't seen a championship win in that time, and he's still paying.
Correct.
That is cool.
Every year.
I've seen him sitting courtside, as they call it. What a Jay-Z rap. I could trip a referee. I own the Knicks. I said courtside. Like, shout out to
not anymore. Not anymore. He's a Nets guy.
Yeah,
he's a Nets guy, not a Knicks guy.
Yeah, so maybe it was the Nets. Yeah. World Cup. You mentioned the FIFA World Cup currently underway. Let's do a bit of deep diving and have some takeaways. There's some wild things going on and wild results going on.
Yeah, I just wanted to start with, as we were finishing the show last week, we started talking about a bit of football, and you dismissed what I had to say about South Africa and Australia in the World Cup.
What did you say?
I just said, you were like dismissing Australia's chances, and you were sort of saying like, oh yeah, good luck. And I said, oh mate, when's the last time that South Africa made the quarters? And you quickly hushed off, and then I got off the podcast very quickly on air. So go back and listen to the end of it. I just wanted to check the pulse of how you're doing after the first round of games for both South Africa and Australia, mate.
I can tell you, since those results, you've been waiting for this moment. You've been chomping at the bit to get recording.
Correct.
And talk about
Correct. 100%. I've got receipts, mate. I keep them, and I'm very interested. But I also said on the podcast last week, the Australians keep receipts, and they love being an underdog. And that's been interesting. We'll get to that in a second. But I found this, the World Cup has engrossed social media, which I think is great, and much of it's been really cool, really fun stuff. And there's some cool stats here that have come out as well, which I think are great. The Netherlands haven't lost a game, a 90-minute match. Sorry, so a match that finished in 90 minutes since 2006.
Is that right?
Yeah. So they've lost overtimes and penalty shootouts, but not a 90-minute match since 2006.
Wow. And did I send this to you, or did you send it to me? There's a scientist who's got a model that has correctly predicted every single result.
We talked about this because I picked them in December, and I think I picked them to beat Portugal in the final, and then the scientist came out, and I brought this up on the podcast. So yes.
So he picks the Netherlands. I can't see that, I must say. They do create a lot of chances, but they've been awful at finishing them. But let's see.
You only need to finish one, mate. So True. Let's see. But also, we talked a lot on this podcast about people moving around, coaches coaching different countries, whether they're allowed to, players moving and changing nationalities. So Morocco fielded their whole team, the whole starting team, born outside of Morocco.
What?
Yeah. Every single one of them was born outside of Morocco.
Okay, I think I actually saw this. Yeah. I think it's strategic. I have some input. I have some things to say, but carry on.
Please say them.
No, I don't know what you want to talk about, but I was actually fascinated by their rise. In the last World Cup in Qatar, they were the first ever African team to reach the semifinals. And then they've been really good this World Cup again. So I actually Googled the other day, why are they so good? And this is one of the strategic blocks to what they did was what you're speaking to. They tapped into the diaspora and their large Moroccan community living in other countries, developed by other academies, very smart smartly who aren't making it into those national teams because competition is so rife. But then back at home as well, the King built a $17 million academy back in 2009. So what they are doing, this is smart. So what they're doing with these athletes, they're obviously the heroes and they're getting the headlines and the attention and inspiring the next generation. And then at home, they are developing the next generation in his academy. But the cool thing is most of them won't make it to the pro ranks. So most athletes leave the academy with a bachelor degree apparently as well, with an education, which is very cool. So it looks like they're setting up their football nation for years.
Well, it's about using sport as a vessel to develop as a human. I used to argue about this when I ran a rugby academy all the time. Like, success isn't necessarily playing for the national team or playing professionally. It could be coaching, refereeing, officiating, or giving back, becoming a staff member at that academy, whatever it is, right? You can just use it as a vessel to learn. But, I've seen a lot of stats around different teams and the number of people from different countries, but France is exporting the most players by far.
Yeah.
Like by a country mile, which doesn't surprise anybody again. Interestingly, Curacao is basically the Netherlands B. It is both a Dutch colony, but also has 25 of 26 players born in the Netherlands. So, that is effectively the Netherlands B team, which speaks to how good, how many players are in that country, right? We talk about this, in the rugby, we could talk about the Springboks fielding two teams as well, and it would be similar.
I watched their game. I need to go fact check this. I thought the commentator said one of the Curacao players, this is the 6th or 7th nation that he's playing for, that he has represented. It can't be right, but yeah, I need to go and double check that, man.
Surely FIFA wouldn't allow it. I mean, most of these guys are only getting to 4 World Cups, so and you'd have a stand down period between them. Yeah. You wouldn't get to more than 4 World Cups, so it'd be difficult to get. And your stand down period would be a couple of years, so it'd be difficult, but maybe. I also saw the Tunisian coach was fired. They got beaten by Sweden 5-1. He was fired straight away. He's got 2 more matches, and this guy's gone. Now there was I heard a bit of a dissection of some of his tactical decisions and selections, and it sounded pretty rough, but still, that's not great.
I think it's a good call. You lose 5-1, it's not going to get better. This is you're in the World Cup. Now, with a new coach, it might not get much better, but you probably stand more of a better chance.
Unless the players wanted him gone and they were like, listen, we're not going to play, right? We'll hear that after the World Cup or whatever. But, yeah. I also saw this, Mikel Oyarzabal, who's a Spanish forward. He's the first player since 1966 to play the first 30 minutes of a match and not touch the football.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
I watched their game.
Touch it.
Actually, come to think of it, I watched their game, and when I saw him, I thought he had come on as a substitute because I'd barely seen him. Now that you mention it,
yeah, not great. That's not great.
That's fascinating.
And then the keepers, they're having a day. The keepers are having an absolute day. I think probably, the player group that's having the best day are the keepers. So the Cape Verde one is, probably the highest profile, Vozinha. So he's a 40-year-old. He went from, obviously had a great day against
Spain.
Spain, yeah. Had a great day against
They drew
kept a clean sheet.
Yeah, and thanks to him.
Yeah, he did a lot of good work there. And he went from 20,000 to 6.2 million followers on Instagram as a result of that.
In 24 hours, less than 24 hours. Crazy.
More than Tim Payne now. So that's quite cool. I saw some really good stuff, him talking about some of the challenges he's had and, his family and all this sort of thing. So it was really cool to see that and see how emotional he was. Also, the Australian goalie, Beach. So he replaced Matty Ryan, who's the captain, had played 100 games for the Socceroos and is in La Liga, kept them up, his team up there. And then Beach is chosen. This young kid plays for Melbourne City in the Australian A-League, and they chose him, and he had 8 saves, had a blind the game. So, really gutsy call from Popovic to do that, and it paid off, which was crazy. The defense was good, but he still had to make 8 saves.
What was the result?
They won 2-0 over Turkey, and that was a huge upset. And Mike Greller, or Greyer, however he pronounces it Greller because he's American, but I'm sure he's not as confident as he was a little while ago. That happens probably around the time this episode goes out. That match will be on, or within a few hours, maybe 12 hours or so. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Australia game there. But I've seen them in betting markets are about 85% chance to go through, which is quite, be quite impressive to see Australia go through to that next round. I think we were talking off air before, they were picked as last in the group. Everyone was picking them to come last. I think so in effect they're having beaten Turkey already. I think they've probably overperformed already.
They'll go through.
Yeah, they'll probably go through.
Top 3 this World Cup, if you finish third, you're likely to go 3. Top 3 goes through this because of the amount of teams.
Okay, I thought it was top one and then a couple of seconds go through. But anyway, the point being, I think people misunderstand championship football. Again, back to the defensive thing. Australia, everyone's commenting on how tall Australia's defenders are. Like, why are you surprised by that? Like, go find the athletes and make them good footballers. And then similarly, like I saw some stuff on social media about the amount of prep Australia got to America before anybody else did. 5 weeks, they had a 5 week camp. They went and did all the in-your stuff, checking hotels for noise and light and mattresses and all that. They've planned everything. They'll know exactly where they'll be, where they'll train, all that stuff, all the way through to the final if they need to be.
Oh
They
wow.
sent their performance team ahead of time to go do this. Like, this is what, one of the things Australia does really well is sports science in a team sport environment. And I think, it's a 1% or a 5% or whatever, but like when you talk about buy-in and culture and all those things and like the champion team versus the team of champions, I think the cost, I think I saw something like the Turkey team is more than 10 times the cost of the Australian team in terms of transfer values or salary values or whatever it is. So
I can
you
believe it,
really
but
are.
the Turkish team does have Arda Güler, who's plays for Real Madrid, and he's one of the most sought after players. So he would bump up that big time. But
Sure.
still,
Yeah, and so it's quite interesting. And I mean, like the captain, I think probably this guy made the point that like they still played better than Australia did. It's like it's fine, and it's true, and that's the challenge of football, right? This is what we were talking about before.
yeah.
That is the challenge of football.
We could talk about this for ages, but we do have to move on before we leave the World Cup chat. Any other takeaways?
Well, like some of the stuff that's been coming out with the fans has been awesome. The Scots taking over Boston has been unbelievable. There was a video of them, the Pipers going down playing Scotland the Braves wedding, going towards the Red Sox, going towards the stadium. They took over the Red Sox stadium and sang "Flower of Scotland," and then the Dutch showing the Texans all about how they support people and their left to right jumping and singing. So it's just been really cool to see that, and just everyone embracing it and really getting involved. And then of course the ref cam, which has been cool. Like
Oh,
RefCam for
super
goals has
cool.
been unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I've really loved that.
I love the changes that, just last thing I'm going to say in the World Cup, I love the changes that they brought in now. So if the ref mistakenly gives a goal kick and it was a corner, VAR can overturn it and vice versa. Also, players have 5 seconds to take a throw in. When substitutes are made, you have to get off the pitch. That substitute has 10 seconds to get off the pitch. If they fail to do so, the player coming on has to stay off for a further minute, an extra minute. So I just love these changes that they've brought into the game, just making it like more dynamic, faster, etc., etc. Obviously, catering to a younger generation and how they consume sports.
Agree. Well, no, just fixing it. It was broken. So yeah, I agree. I mean,
Yeah,
yes, maybe catering to a younger generation, but also I agree. You can't
yeah,
fluff around with that stuff.
yeah. Comrades Marathon. I was glued to my television last week. It was actually really hard in South Africa because it was on multiple channels with multiple different commentary teams. So I like when one had a bad angle, I would switch to another channel, see if they had a better angle. It was like almost too much coverage, but it was so good to watch. Legendary. Next year's actually the 100th edition. I'm really sad to be missing it. I would have loved to do that. But what happened in the race? Quickly.
I mean, I watched a bit of it. You sent me the YouTube link. I thought the YouTube coverage was really good. So, kudos to Comrades there. We can be pretty critical, but I thought commentators knowledgeable, angles were good. They had lots of different cameras on different people. I thought it was really great. Gerda Steen, all over again. She won it. New course record, new best average pace of 5:44 per kilometer. She earns herself around 2 million Rand, apparently. So 925,000 for the victory, 605,000 for the record, and 550,000 for the fastest average pace record.
That is a
So that's
good payday. That's probably about $100,000 for the day. Not a bad payday.
that is very impressive. And then George Cush, we talked about, so new course record as well. He ran 5:15 in a great win with some really smart pacing, apparently.
Yeah. And speaking to experience, I think last year he was top 10 in the race. So this year understood
Yes.
the race more and then come back for the win. Let's move on. Is this true? Alex Yee is racing Monaco Diamond League. What distance is he doing?
He's going to run the 5,000 there. So the last time he ran a Diamond League was in London in 2019. But yeah, he's doing the 5,000. I thought he'd be better in the 10,000.
That's
But
what
there's
I
also probably
thought. Yeah.
but also it's probably not worth it given he'd be in spikes, and that'd probably mean he can't train properly for a while because you'd have to get into spikes, get used to them, but also then like you got to recover off the back of that. Even the new super spikes are not quite as good as something like that. And yes, you're wearing spikes for the 5,000, but it's double the distance, right? And more than double the fatigue. So, but his PB is 13:13. in the 5,000, and the world lead this year is 12:47. So, he'll be there or thereabouts. Like, he won't look terribly out of place in the race, but he's not going to be anywhere near the front, I would say, in this Diamond League. And particularly because I've got a feeling that even if it's tactical, he'll get blown out of the water. Like, they're going to be a lot quicker than him, flat 400 speed. He just doesn't have the time to maintain that.
Do you know when that is?
London Diamond League? Ooh,
Is it not Monaco?
So Monaco Diamond League. I don't know off the top of my head. No, we can check it up on the calendar. But you check that while I'll check that while you carry on, mate.
Yeah, so the next thing we wanted to talk about was Joshua Cheptegei will be racing in Durban, South Africa. Durban is hot at the moment, man. That's just where the Comrades Marathon took place, so they are obviously on it when it comes to sports. But do you know what he'll be racing?
Yeah, the 10K in the Absa Durban 10K. So he's chasing a sub 27 minutes. So I thought South African listeners would be interested in that, and it's quite quick. I got here for you, mate. So and we're going to talk about this in a little while. So Doha Diamond League has been moved from earlier in the season because of obvious reasons. So now it's on the 19th of June. So that'll be what I'm watching this weekend. And then on the 10th of July is Monaco.
Okay, cool. Thanks
so we got 19th is Doha, then we got the 28th is Paris, then the 4th of July is in Eugene, and then the 10th of July is in Monaco.
I'll be traveling in France and Italy then. From Spain to Italy, I'll be missing it, unfortunately.
Tough life, mate.
I know. Okay, so we talked about Joshua Cheptegei. He'll be headlining Absa Durban 10K. Let's see. He's chasing 27 minutes. My PB is in that race as well in the Absa 10K. My PB is 42 minutes. Good luck, Joshua. Let's see if you'll break that.
Same, but different.
Exactly. NCAA track and field performance continues to astonish. We've talked about this a little in the previous episodes. What's been going down now?
Well, it's a world record in the hurdles, in the men's hurdles. That's the first thing. It's probably the biggest news. So Jacoby Tharp ran 12:75 with a 1 meter tailwind. So that was legal. And so then that was in the semi. And in the final, he ran 12:9 to win with a small headwind. So he's also, so I looked him up. He's national champion and world under 20 champion in 2024. And he got 6th in the world champs last year in the hurdles, in the men's open hurdles. So obviously very talented. This is a pretty impressive run. He's American to that point. And then other races that were, pretty impressive. So the 400 meter winner, Samuel Ogazi, is a Nigerian born. So he ran the 4th fastest 400 in history. Wow. So the 3 people ahead of him, Wade Van Niekerk, Michael Johnson, and Butch Reynolds. So this is a real impressive run. He ran 43:38. He is the 2025 NCAA champion, and no one's surprised by that. He also got 7th in Paris, and obviously he won that race as also his 2026 champion, and then 7th in the Olympics. So this guy's obviously really impressive. He's a world class, and again, this is what we talked about with the NCAA, where you have all these people who are from effectively been brought in to run to win championships, right? So, and the last one is a bit more controversial. Adaja Hodge, she's second. She got 2nd in the NCAA 100 meters behind Shanae Walker, who's Jamaican. Now, Adaja is from the British Virgin Islands. So she ran 10:63 in the semi-final to win that and obviously get a national record, but also break Sha'Carri Richardson's NCAA record, which was 10:75.
Wow.
So this is, very quick time. She also won, but doesn't hold, the gold in the 200 meters and silver in the 100 meters at under 20 world champs in 2024. And we'll talk about this. And she was a Paris Olympian as well. So there's some questions. Like, I saw a lot of questions in it. Maybe my social feed is let's call it cynical. A lot of questions about doping around these results. And then I was doing some reading into Adaja. So she served a 2-year doping ban. And so she tested positive for metabolites of GW501516.
She's only 20 years old, and she's already served a doping ban.
So she has. So it's a metabolic modulator. We'll talk about this in a second. So she tested positive at those under 20 world championships and was subsequently stripped of those titles. So apparently, rather than deflect it, she sat down and sort of started talking to them straight away and acknowledged she had a violation, and then it was agreed that she probably ingested it unknowingly. And so therefore it became contamination of negligence rather than deliberate cheating. So then you accept a 2-year ineligibility and standard sanction. So effectively that lasted 17 months though, because of everything that had happened around it. as a result, she's obviously stripped of her gold medals. And so this is for basically cooperation and acceptance of I guess, responsibility rather than trying to deflect it. So for context, so she rose to prominence as a high schooler at the Monteverde Academy in Claremont, Florida. In March 2023, she ran 22:33 to break the high school indoor world 200-meter record. And her teammate, Issam Asinga, set the under-20 world record in the 100 meters in 2023. He tested positive for the same substance in July. He claimed the positive test stemmed from ingesting contaminated Gatorade gummies. I think we talked about this at the time because I remember the Gatorade gummies.
Yes.
He was handed a 4-year ban and stripped of his record. Both Hodge and Asinga were coached by Monteverde Academy Gerald Peary, and I think we talked about him as well, a two-time Olympic sprinter for Zambia, and he was provisionally suspended as a result of this, and he was suspended for having possession of that GW 1516 as an athlete in 2018-2019 and another metabolic modulator, meldonium, as a coach in 2024 and failing to cooperate with the investigation and providing false inaccurate information. So 3 of his athletes have tested positive for the GW 1516 between 2023 and 2024.
I was going to say where there's smoke, there's fire, but there's not even smoke or fire. They're just positive tests. That's what they are for the same substance.
Yeah, so for those very interested in very technical, I won't go into it too much, but it's a PPAR gamma activator, and there's an interesting mice study showing that it's potentially performance enhancing in them. So there's been quite a few bans for it across cycling and a few other things. So it's probably it's probably helpful, unfortunately. So this got me thinking about people who are cynical about these other records, right? Like, so there's a bunch of records or fast times run, and there's different ways to think about this. And one way to think about this is Bayesian reasoning. And I don't know if people are familiar with this, but basically you have a prior, your starting belief. So your starting belief is everyone's clean, everyone's dirty. Some people are, you're dirty if you're from Kenya, you're clean if you're from America, whatever that is, right? You start with a baseline probability, right? And then you get new evidence, and then you update your belief, right? So the more positives we get, perhaps the more we say, okay, these people are cheating or not cheating, right? And the more unbelievable it is, or the more people who are in the top 100 list of all time who are banned, and people there. So you would update it is basically what I'm thinking about. And I think so that's the way to think about this, I think, is the Bayesian reasoning. But there's also like how to be a fan of the sport, because it's really hard to be a fan if you believe everyone's doping. Full stop. So I think I've grappled with this a lot. I get asked about this question a lot. So I think the answer is, there's a Bayesian reasoning component to this, like how likely is this to happen? And then there's a secondary level to that, which is how do you decide whether you believe people are clean or dirty? And I think you just have to assume, my take is it's either degrading the sport or you just believe everyone's clean until they're proven not clean. And people could say that's ignorant, but otherwise you can't enjoy the sport, in my opinion, because anytime you see something great, you're like, well, it's probably doping. Because that's the most reasonable way to think about it, is like exceptional performances are probably dirty. That is like probably a fair statement.
I struggle with that a lot as someone who's grown up passionate about cycling, been a cyclist my whole life, and then managed to make it my profession for the last 15 years working in professional cycling. Obviously, the sport has its past, but when you ask outsiders, they will probably still, in a lot of instances, see it as tainted. But along with that, the sport has had a lot of advancements in technology, in science, in engineering, and that doping cloud seems to like write those things off, So we could be seeing incredible clean performances from athletes, but then we view it through a skeptical eye because of the sport's past, And I'm like you, I can be cynical as well. I don't like I'm old enough to know that if something looks like something, it's more than likely it can be the more obvious choice. But yeah, that's something I grapple with in cycling a lot. I mean, and I try to not just have an assumption of doping, because just bicycles, when I look at a bicycle now versus a bicycle 10 years ago, it is chalk and cheese. Like, the engineering is phenomenal. So like you say, obviously, once Lance Armstrong got popped and he got done for, then you're in your most cynical view of the sport ever. And then as years go by, you likely have to update your beliefs. I really like what you said there, update your beliefs, which is something I'll probably do less and less of the older I get and the more grumpy I get. I'll just be staunch and believe what I want to believe, but hopefully not.
That's the privilege you get of being old, mate. That's what happens for everyone as they get old. But this is important, I guess. Some extra context here. There's not a lot of testing in the NCAA, and I saw some people making comment about that. One thing I would say is, if these athletes are competing at the Olympics or World Championships, they would be in testing pools because they would not be allowed to go otherwise. So the NCAA may not be testing them, but there is certainly testing pools around those events, and again, obviously major events like the under 20 World Championships, as we mentioned. And getting popped there is really just like it's an IQ test more than a drug test. Like, you shouldn't be getting popped in major championships.
The last thing I will say is, and this is going to sound very, very harsh, but any coach who convinces an athlete who is, let's call it under 20, I think still a child, by law in most countries, 18, you're an adult. But if you are doping or convincing anyone under 20 years to dope, there's a special place. There should be a special place in hell for you, like manipulating someone like that and changing the course and trajectory of their life forever. Like, there should be a special place in hell for you, man. For me, that is black and white.
Yeah, I agree with that. You can't be like, kids as kids, and you can't be. You should be setting a good example for them. Even if you want them to use drugs in the long term, I still think as a child they shouldn't be doing it. Right? Like, you should be setting a good example and setting those habits up first.
Yeah.
So I think best, like, it sounds ridiculous, but like best practice for doping would be to start later, not earlier.
Yeah.
Which is such a ridiculous statement. Such a ridiculous statement. Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, it's gonna age like milk, but anyway, whatever.
Yeah. Should we move on?
Please.
Let's talk about the Diamond League. They've been coming back to back. I don't even know what the last one is that we watched. Is that Oslo?
Yeah, Bislett Games in Oslo. So the first thing I noticed here, or took note of, so many good young athletes. Cooper Lukenhaus, Gout, Enos Fitzgerald, the sort of 3,000, 5,000 runner from the UK, Yan Ziyi, the javelin thrower from China that we mentioned previously, Cam Myers from Australia, like, just all these people like 20 years or younger. Like, that's unbelievable when we're thinking about the next two Olympic cycles, right? You're talking about LA and Brisbane. We're going to see these people, potentially the third one as well after that. I don't know where the next one is after Brisbane, but that's real impressive to think about. We'll start with the men's 200. Like, Teboho absolutely smoked this, and Gout really struggled in it.
I was really anticipating this race. You gave me a heads up and you say, look it up, Teboho and Gout are running in the same event here.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it was interesting to me. The commentators spoke out of both sides of their mouth, which always annoys me. They were saying, how good's Gout? He's going to do so well here. And then when he didn't do so well, they said, we're not surprised by that. So you don't get to be both of those things.
Yeah,
you get to either pump him up. Like, it's
Did
one
you
of those
expect him
things.
to not do well?
I don't think so I didn't expect him to win the race, period, full stop. No chance. I thought he would run faster, but I didn't think, and I thought he'd be doing better, but it didn't surprise me greatly that he struggled. And we'll get to some comments on this in a second. One of the reasons I thought he wouldn't do so well, he's come down off nationals, running really well at nationals, and he's sort of building back up to this and to the under 20 national world championships that are coming up in Oregon in a little while. And we've got an episode upcoming on periodization. So if that's something that interests you, both keep an eye out for it, but also subscribe to the podcast that's coming in a few weeks. And we'll talk about this sort of thing, is because you can't stay up the whole time, right? So that's one of the reasons as well. But there were some comments in the aftermath of Teboho saying he should stay racing under 20 years people, and just saying, like, don't race against me. I didn't do that. I saw people who did that, struggle, like, competed against me. And I think that's not a terrible take, but I think, it's coming from people will probably think it's ill-intentioned. And I don't think it is. I think it's actually well-intentioned from Teboho. I also think he's right, and with a but, or with an asterisk, which is to say, in all sport, you need to be a big fish in a small pond and a small fish in a big pond, because those two things look different. They're different psychologically, they're different emotionally, and you need to learn that, both of those. And that's team sport as well. I used to say a lot that you often get pushed to take talent, like kids who are displaying high levels of performance, and push them up to compete against, in team sports, like to play in the next up team. And I think that's good, but I also used to say to them, it's important you go back and learn to be the superstar. Because if you really want to be the best, there is going to be a time where the game is on the line and it is about you winning. You say, throw me the ball and let me win, right? That is an important quality to develop as well. Or when you have to, or maybe you don't develop that quality, maybe you develop the quality of, I'm not going to choke under pressure because I've been the best player before, so I know what it's like to have to put the team on my back. So I do think both playing up and playing down is important. So it's important that Gout goes to the World Championships with expectation on him to win it, the Under-20 World Championships. And it's important that he goes to the Diamond League under serious pressure in a different way, which is like, how do you compete with people who are better than you, right?
Interesting. Okay. So you're taking a view of long-term development.
Yeah, as is his coach and his manager. They're smart people. I've heard them talk. Like, I'd love to talk to both of them. I don't think his coach does podcasts, but his manager, James Templeton, does, and he's a smart guy. So they've got a very clear sort of way of doing this. There's very specific reasons he's running these races, when he's running them, where he's racing them, etc. So I've said this before, I'll say it again about all these young people. There's no guarantee they improve at all, period, full stop. Hope they're high potential, and we'd love to see them get better and, set records or whatever, but they may not, and their careers have been very successful already, so there's that. But you could see generally when you try to run fast, you don't run fast. It's about relaxing into it a little bit, and I think if Gout's start isn't great and never has been, so he's behind to start with. He also was inside to Borjo, so there's a lot of psychological pressure on him, and I think that's probably why he didn't run so fast, right, is kind of my take on this.
Yeah, that was. I'm looking forward to more and more of this. Let's see if God can close that gap. But that's very interesting what you said there about playing up and down. You see it. I see it a lot in Manchester United. They often draft the under-21 players into a Premier League game, give them some minutes. They in the senior squad for a few weeks, then go back to the under-29 game and under-29 and go and win there. I know you wanted to talk about the 800 meters as well, because we covered in the previous Diamond Leagues where Lutkenhaus, the 17-year-old kid you mentioned, the young kid's doing really, really well. Did he have it all his way in this race again?
Basically, which is wild. So Emmanuel, when I said last week when we talked about this, Emmanuel Wanyonyi wasn't there in the race. It turns out he just had a baby. So his wife had just had a baby, so he missed that last one. So, so they started the race, and they went through. The split at halfway was 49.81. Cooper Lutkenhaus' split was 50.05. So 50.5. So he's a little bit behind. There was a pacemaker, and then when Yoni was behind the pacemaker, as he likes to. So he was always going to pull Lutkenhaus along to a fast time. I said last week of the 800, you get one move and one move only, right? And so with 200 meters to go, Lutkenhaus passes Wanyonyi. Like, it was almost disrespectful. I was like, okay, wow, that's an interesting move. And in the last 50 meters, when Yoni's pushing all he has and couldn't do it, and just on the line, Lutkenhaus outdips him. He ran 1:42.08, which is just bananas. That is so fast, and it was such a good race from Lutkenhaus. Like, just so much maturity. I can't believe this.
And in the last while, Wanyonyi was the best. He's the best 800 meter in the world, right? The last few years.
Current Olympic champion. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So, this kid, man. Let's see how he develops and what's next for him. I watched the women's javelin with a very acute eye after you educated us on last week's episode.
Yeah. So Yanzi Yee was back. So she won in Xiamen. So she's like 17, 18 years old. She's a young Chinese thrower. And we talked about her previously with all the strapping on her elbow and throwing minimally, and I think for load reasons because of javelin weight. So go back and listen to that if you're interested. She only threw twice this time, but won it again. Didn't break, didn't throw as far as she did in China. But we talked a bit about travel last week and the importance here. And again, thinking about development, you send a 20-year-old around the world to these events like, hey, go learn what it's like to be in Oslo and how you have to compete there and try and go win there, right? So I thought that was quite a cool thing to see that as well. I mean, she's so much better than everybody else physically. It's like
I thought she actually threw once only. I don't remember her throwing once, but she threw.
She might have thrown once. I wrote down twice, but I thought she'd only thrown once as well. Regardless,
it's still wild. It's still
you
not travel
6.
all the way from China to there for one throw. You win. You get. She was dressed up warmly the whole time, and you see all the other competitors like warming up and throwing continually. Crazy.
Yeah, it's not 6. And then in the pole vault, so Curtis Marshall's the Giant Slayer again.
Wow.
So he won this one. So Corrales was there. So Mondo wasn't there because he was getting married that weekend. Corrales was there. He's second all time behind Mondo. He's jumped 6:17, but he failed out at 5:82, and Marshall beat him.
I'm surprised at that. He did so well last season. Very surprised.
Yeah, so did Mondo, but pressure's a funny thing, man. And Curtis Marshall's, he's on our heater. Like we talked about momentum at the top of the episode. Momentum's with Curtis Marshall. He's like, I never thought I'd win a Diamond League. Now I've won 2 in a row.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah.
So, I would say I don't know if there's pole vault at the Ultimate Championships, but like, watch out for, he got, he's probably the 3rd best pole vaulter in the world. So like, maybe it's not a hot take to say he's a chance of getting a medal, but, I wouldn't be surprised if he makes some waves and really gives him a go at the world champs, because it's like he's on a heater, man.
But what is that momentum? Can it be quantified, like scientifically? Can you bottle it? Can you measure it? Like, because this often happens. Someone doesn't win a race, someone doesn't score a goal their whole careers, and then they do it back to back, after the first time. It's happens so often.
Some of it's just confidence.
Yeah.
Like you're just confident in your ability, particularly in the vertical jumps, man. So much of that's about confidence, like believing you can get over the bar. Because it's not that easy.
Knicks fans might love hearing this. They might win the championship next year again. Wait 53 years and then you go back to back. Let's see.
Well, that's difficult because you've got more fatigue, right? Because they have to play longer than everyone else. They have less time off, more fatigue, all that stuff. So let's see. Yeah. But the men's 5,000, man, unbelievable. Did you watch this?
Yes, but remind me again what happened.
It's real tactical battle, really good. So pacemakers are there, they're doing their thing, and then all of a sudden Kai Robinson from Australia is there, and he thought, this is too good an opportunity, I've got to go here. So he's been at college in the States, he's been running really well. They went through 2K in 5:09, 4K in 10:22, and then at the the finish times was 12:47 for world lead, and just everybody, like so many people went under 13 minutes. It was insane. And so it was won by Yahune from Belawi. Anyway, and then Andreas Almgren, Nomeo user, got third, which was pretty crazy. There were Americans 4th to 6th, so that was Wolf, Fisher, and Blanks, with Wolf running a PB of 12:49. And then Kai Robinson got reward. He got swamped and ended up getting 8th. So like some people would think it's a failure, but that's an Australian record. He beat a 22-year-old record from Craig Mottram, the big Mzungu. So he ran 12:50 to beat that record. So that was a really impressive run from Kai. He'd be stoked with that.
What is the mile race? What do they call it? Not the Dream Mile. It had some interesting. Is the Dream Mile?
Yeah, I think at Bislett it's the Dream Mile. I think something like that. Yeah,
that was interesting.
So yeah, it's cool. Yeah, so it was great. I mean, Chariot beat Nagoose on the line there. So Nagoose has been on a heater, won a last couple, but got pipped there. And then it was interesting to watch Cam Myers lead a lot of this, which right up Nagoose's alley. But he got boxed in the end and didn't quite make it. He sort of got out a little bit, but I think he'll be better for that. I think he'll learn from that. But it's unfortunate for him. But it was a great effort, and good on Cam Myers for having a crack there.
It was unfortunate for Nagoose because he was celebrating like it won. They first called him to win, and he did his cool celebration there, and then they corrected it in the photo finish, and he had to take that back.
Yeah, I don't like. It's kind of cool to think you win at some point anyway. Like obviously you'd prefer to actually win, but yeah, no, it's good. I think Nagoose is in good form. If you're an American fan, you'd be happy with Nagoose's form. Probably a little bit less so like some of the other American guys, like the 5,000 guys. Well, obviously Wolf's doing well, but Blanks and Fisher might be. I mean, maybe they're rounding into some form, or maybe they're just a little bit off the pace this year.
If you are listening to this podcast and you find it interesting, us diving into different sports and just looking at interesting angles from it, and you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, do so now, please. We try to find the most interesting stories from around the world for you every single week, and we release a new episode every single Friday, so hit that subscribe button. Should we get to this week's doctor's office? Who's injured? Who's struggling? I think the first person is professional cyclist Chloe Dygert, who just announced that her return to racing will be delayed.
Yeah, I mean, this was brutal. You sent me this post. I was like, geez. I said to you, that's not the doctor's office, it's a whole hospital, right? So she said in her Instagram post, after months of rehab, it became clear that something still wasn't right. Since attempting to return to training, I've been officially diagnosed with Red S, picked up a virus, and my blood markers continue to trend in the wrong direction. An MRI also confirmed that my shoulder damage from my Roubaix crash will require surgery after rehab wasn't successful, and further imaging revealed a collapsed nasal valve that will also need surgery. Not exactly the update I was hoping to share, but for now it's back to focusing on recovery, getting healthy. Goals haven't changed. Just the path getting there has. I'll be back. I mean, this is just a laundry list of issues. Look, my take home from this was like, I wonder what role systemic stress, allostatic load has on this. Like, has it been pressure for her to get back to training, be it internal, external, stakeholders, whoever it is, team, races, whatever else? Because it's so many things that aren't quite getting there, right? She's been rehabbing the shoulder, but it's not there, and she's sick and her blood markers are getting worse and all that stuff.
I know her environment a bit. She works on a really good team, Canyon Shram, really good environment. I know the team owner. I think she would be putting a lot of pressure on herself. She's one of their better riders, probably one of their higher paid riders, I'd guess, second or third highest paid rider. So she'd be putting a lot of pressure on herself. But she's resilient. If you look at her legs and her quads, they are different sizes because she had a very near career ending crash a few years ago. I think it was in the World Championships time trial. She slid under a barrier, cut her leg, severed her leg really, really badly, almost ended her career. So she's got a horrible gash here. That took her a lot. That took a lot of resilience for her to come back. So she's no stranger to setbacks. So I've no doubt we'll see her come back from this. But this seems like another mountain she's going to have to climb.
Yeah, for sure. So best wishes to Chloe, and hopefully yeah, all that comes good. And then we had Molly Caudry, so the British pole vault record holder. So she had an emergency microdiscectomy. I thought you'd be interested in this, mate. So
Wow.
they removed part of the damaged disc from the spine, and the reason is you can see her MRI if you go look at Google her and you'll see it. So she said, for context, I had a back flare up last week and got worse quickly. Immediate surgical intervention was needed to prevent further damage. This disc would have been actively bulging and causing potential compromise to the spinal cord, I'd suggest. So yeah, not
Well,
great.
wishes to her. When I hear laminectomy, discectomy, spinal fusion, obviously my ears perk up now, and I'm very interested in it because I see myself as an expert in it now, back
Yeah,
specialist, giving people
just
advice out
like
in public.
just like I eat well, so I'm a chef.
Exactly,
Um,
exactly.
what happened to the Dauphiné, mate? In the end of that, you mentioned you were going to be watching some of that. I didn't catch the end of it. I saw like there was lots of controversy, lots of different people winning. Who ended up winning it?
There was a slight anticlimax in that one of the pre-race favorites, Paul Sextus, crashed on the second last day, so he lost contention there, and then he started the last day, but then abandoned quite early on when it became clear that he couldn't continue. So UAE won with Isaac Del Toro, one of the other favorites for the race. There were some big hitters outside of Jonas Vingegaard and Tadej Pogacar, definitely the next best GC riders in the race were there. So it was so interesting to see 4 or 5 fairly evenly matched riders go head to head against each other. And then once again, UAE, probably the best team in the world the last 2-3 years, arguably against Visma Lisa Bike, coming out on top there. Um, yeah, keep an eye on the Tour de France. Paul Sextus is a 19-year-old revelation, probably the best talent that France has had in generations, I'd say, in cycling. So much so that they're taking him to the Tour de France this year, even though he's never done a Grand Tour before. For people who don't know, Grand Tours are Tour de France, Giro d'Italia, Volta a España, 3 biggest races in cycling. He's never done a 3-week race before, and they're taking a 19-year-old there as the leader. I'm not sure I would do that so early in his career, but let's see how he goes. The Dauphiné was good prep for him because the French media was there, already put him under pressure. Obviously, the crash is not good for him, but he's dealing with adversity there early on in his career, which will hopefully make him stronger. But let's hope he recovers very quickly from this.
Yeah, interesting. What are you watching this weekend, mate? What are you going to watch?
World Cup is on, so lots and lots of football. Team Amani, the African team, I'm helping out, doing the last race in Europe, the women's team for this block, the Volta Catalunya, racing against World Tour teams. This is the toughest competition they've faced so far. Shout out to Demi Vollering, by the way. Tour de France winner, recent Giro d'Italia winner, who sent the Team Amani women a well-wishing video saying she's been watching their progress, being inspired by them. First ever all-black African women's cycling team racing in Europe, man. Super, super cool. Cool of Demi
That
to
is
do
cool.
that. Anyway,
That is cool.
you asked me what I'm watching this week, and then I went off on a tangent. What are you watching?
Well, I mean, so we're recording this on Tuesday, so I'm going to try and catch the Ostrava Golden Spike tonight. That has Femke Bol racing at 800 against Audrey Wero. So I'm going to try and catch that tomorrow morning, my time. There's a State of Origin game too. We talk about this every time. It's one of the few things I'm a true fanatic about. So let's see how that goes. Fingers crossed for Queensland to win that one. Doesn't look good. We're playing in a place we don't play well in, and we're big underdogs. But there you go. A bit of World Cup, no doubt. But and then some Diamond League. I mentioned earlier there is some Diamond League that I'll be watching on the 19th, but I'm away this weekend, so I don't know how much of that I'll get to see. So we'll see what happens. I might have to one of the nice things of Diamond League is it's quite nice to watch in a 2-hour block, but also if you don't have time, if you can record it, it's quite a quick watch. If you fast forward the
Yeah.
gaps, it can be quite a quick watch.
I don't know. We've had the discussion before. I watched the highlights recently, and then last week, Oslo one, I watched live. And in previous years, I have enjoyed the highlights, but for some reason, I enjoyed the Oslo live one better. I'm not sure why. I think
I,
it had to do with the cut of the highlights package that I watched before. It often depends on how it's edited.
I think it's a good product. They've got it. It's been perfected over years. Like obviously you miss bits and pieces and they cut to field events and stuff. But we talked about this with Grand Slam Track is the field is a feature, not a bug. It actually helps between races. Otherwise it's just dead time.
Yeah.
But I do think they do a really good job of wrapping it all up and making it good. I enjoy a 2-hour Diamond League live. I really do like it. But it is nice when you haven't to be able to fast forward some of that. I don't watch highlights. I fast forward the actual live coverage to catch bits and pieces of it, to just not watch the replays and stuff. So you can get through it relatively quickly. So yeah, that's probably what I'll end up doing.
Okay, let's get out of here. As I said earlier, we publish a new episode every single Friday. Thank you so much for everyone coming along for this. Let's get out of here, David. Thank you so much for putting this together. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, mate. See you then.